What if I told you the man who danced his way into 70 million torched it all on gold toilets, race horses, and a pool shaped like his pants, and then came back as a Silicon Valley investor? MC Hammer didn't just blow a fortune, he rebuilt himself into something smarter, quieter, and untouchable in a different way. And if you're the type chasing success, here's a tip. MC Hammer pretty much wrote the textbook on pure, uncut hustle. Here's how the fall became the power move.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
Before the stock options and startup handshakes, before the sermons and speaking gigs, before Hammer rebranded as a tech whisperer in a hoodie, he was bleeding money like a busted fire hydrant in the middle of Oakland. At the peak of his empire, Stanley Kirk Burrell was spending $500,000 a month, and that wasn't on tour expenses or investment portfolios. That was his life overhead. A 40,000 square foot mansion with gold-plated gates, marble everything, and a garage that looked like a Hot Wheels billionaire starter pack. He had 200 people on payroll, not fans or friends, employees, bodyguards, backup dancers, barbers, secretaries, security teams, chefs, animal trainers. One guy's job was literally to do errands. Hammer's idea of budgeting was more. He made over $70 million by the early 90s, and every dime had somewhere to go, fast, but nobody saw the bottom coming. But just surviving in East Oakland was a full-time hustle. Stanley didn't learn ambition from a self-help book. He learned it by dodging eviction notices and stretching dinner for $9. Before anybody called him Hammer, before anybody cared about parachute pants, he was working the parking lot outside the Oakland Coliseum, scavenging stray baseballs and flipping them back to fans for pocket change. And the Burrell apartment? 3 bedrooms, 9 bodies, and a dad who could lose next month's rent on a single hand of cards. Hunger gnawed everything. And Stanley was always on the move. If he wouldn't break dancing for dollars with a beatboxer, he was finding new angles to scrape together cash. That restless grinding energy, it wasn't for show, it was survival. And it was that edge, sharpened by poverty and chaos, that would get him in front of the right people, long before anybody realized the kid dancing in the Coliseum lot would one day become a global brand and then a punchline. But standing in that battered dugout, running towels to Reggie Jackson, Stanley Burrell was already collecting secrets of American royalty, witnessing egos, swagger, and the showbiz grind up close. He was the team's mascot, and he was also the team's shadow, soaking up everything the big leagues had to offer. That's where he became Hammer, courtesy of Reggie, who thought the kid looked like Hank Aaron, baseball's original Hammer, and it stuck. The MC, that'd come later, when Hammer was running mic duties at local clubs, drumming up crowds with a preacher's hypnotic cadence. Ball player dreams faded, but he never got past the tryouts, not with the Giants or anywhere else. The door slammed shut on that particular fantasy. So he stood at another crossroads, stick to the safe grind of the Navy, or follow the flash and danger of the streets. And for a second, dealing looked tempting. Fast money, respect, but a short clock. So instead, Hammer chose a uniform, 3 years as a naval petty officer, taking orders and biding time. By 84, he was out, older, sharper, ready to torch the world in ways no bat boy ever could. The only question left was how high he could climb before it all gave way underneath him. And the $1.75 million check hadn't hit his account yet, but Hammer was already moving like a mogul. Back in the Bay after his Navy stint, he didn't wait around for permission. No stage too small, no gig beneath him. Hammer was grinding, shaping a live show that blurred the line between preacher and pop star. But when a record deal slipped through his fingers, he didn't fold. He leveled up. He walked straight to 2 former Oakland A's, Mike Davis and Dwayne Murphy, and pitched them an idea. Not a demo, not a business plan, but he wanted $20,000 from each of them. No guarantees, just have faith. And they bit. That money built Busted Productions from scratch. Hammer started pressing vinyl out of his basement, selling them like bootlegs straight from the trunk of his car. And it worked. 60,000 units moved, brought in $1.75 million. Pure, raw perseverance. By the time Capitol Records came knocking in '88, he had already gone platinum on his own terms. Let's Get It Started. That was an album that hit hard. And Hammer proved that he didn't need a label to get famous. But with this earned $1.75 million on the table, well, now he had ammo. And the next move was going to be nuclear. Nobody was ready for what would hit on January 13th, 1990. One night he's tearing it up on Arsenio, and the next he's detonating a bomb under the entire music industry. Please, Hammer, don't hurt him. Didn't just go big, it went diamond, selling 10 million copies in the US alone. First rap record in history to even graze that kind of territory. And eventually, over 22 million worldwide. No rap album before or since has moved numbers like that. And at the core, you can't touch this. Built on Rick James' Super Freak, with Rick's blessing and involvement. And it went ballistic. Interestingly, though, Billboard only gave it a number 8 slot, but that didn't matter. The catchphrase, the hammer pants, the unstoppable dance hijacked every radio station, school gym, and living room across the planet. You didn't need a chart to see that. You could feel it in the streets. Then came Have You Seen Her, Pray, hit after hit, and the Grammys couldn't ignore it anymore. Hammer walked away in 91 with 3 trophies, arms heavy with validation. And that wasn't the peak. That was just the setup. By 1991, Hammer was pretty damn rich, and he was everywhere. The numbers were absurd. Forbes pinned him at $33 million in 1990. Then another $33 million rolled in the next year. That's $70 million in a span most artists don't survive, let alone dominate. And this wasn't just about records and tours. Hammer had morphed into a living logo. The pants, not parachute pants, they were Hammer pants. And he'd give you a history lecture about Persian roots if you called them anything else. But whatever you called them, they were a uniform, and every kid in America wanted a pair. He booked commercials, landed a cartoon, Hammerman, popped up in movies, did NBA halftime shows, made Pepsi look cool. You couldn't touch a TV dial, mall speaker, or playground without hearing, seeing, or imitating Hammer. He had gone from a rapper to the first hip-hop mogul. Diddy took notes between slathers of baby oil. Will Smith watched closely when he wasn't smacking comedians upside the head. This was the prototype. But what nobody knew then? That $70 million empire was burning from the inside. Hammer had built a palace, but he forgot to check the foundation. By 1991, the shine was already starting to crack, even if nobody wanted to admit it. Too Legit to Quit hit shelves with all the fanfare of a royal coronation. The album moved 4 million units worldwide. That's blockbuster territory for anybody else, but not for Hammer. Not after Please Hammer Don't Hurt Him. Not after Diamond. Capitol Records was expecting the second nuclear blast. What they got was a firecracker pop with a receipt. The tour, global, bombastic, and bled money with like an open wound. The video for Too Legit to Quit, a swollen, ego-soaked monster stacked with cameos and explosions, closer to a short film than a promo. Rumors swirled about it costing over $2 million. All spectacle, little return. And that was just the opening act for the main event, The Fall. Between 1990 and 1996, Hammer scorched through $70 million like it was kindling. Mansions, plural folks, racehorses, a helicopter, the staff of 200. His payroll looked more like a tech startup than a solo act. And this went well beyond bad money management into straight-up financial performance art. The collapse was a free fall with no parachute, only Hammer pants. By the time the smoke cleared, Hammer's garage looked more like a Bond villain's daydream than a musician's driveway. Nearly 20 luxury cars, all gleaming like showroom models, each one another exclamation point on his financial freefall. Rolls Royces, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, and he wasn't driving them all. Most just sat, ticking down in value while the payments piled up. And then there was the private jet, because first class did not match the pants. And just in case the jet felt too slow or too grounded, he bought 2 helicopters, not rented, but owned them, called them in like Uber rides. Let's put that into perspective for just a quick second. Let's say that you owned a helicopter. You're not a pilot, but you wanted to fly 100 miles from your home. For a light R-44 type of helicopter, that would cost you anywhere between $500 and $1,200. So it's a nice quick 100-mile trip, but it's going to cost. Now imagine you're flying that thing everywhere. And there you got MC Hammer's situation. But Hammer's real status play came with his plunge into the sport of kings. 21 thoroughbred racehorses, some worth upwards of $1 million each at the time. And he wasn't just buying horses, he was buying pedigrees, chasing the high of prestige at auction speed. Trainers, handlers, stable maintenance, it all added up really fast. And the track wasn't where he made his fortune, it's where he bled it out. But still, the race wasn't over yet. He hadn't hit bottom, but you could hear the ground rushing up. If there was a single place where Hammer's empire reached peak delusion, it was in Fremont, California, a $12 million estate that turned into a $42 million black hole. It wasn't a house, it was a tribute to himself. The upgrades, unhinged. Gold-plated gates screamed Hammer time to anybody dumb enough to question who lived there. The front lawn, decorated with marble statues of MC Hammer. Step inside and the absurdity dialed up fast. Gold hot tub. Gold toilet. Every room dripping with enough shine to blind a man. And then came the carnival extras. The 40,000 square foot footprint. The 20-car garage. private bowling alley, tennis courts, recording studio, even a baseball field, custom built to match the baseball field that he couldn't make it to professionally. So Hammer was still able to chase that dream, but just in backyard form. The most psychotic flex? A swimming pool shaped like his pants. And just to keep the lights on, Hammer was dropping $500,000 a year. And with no new hits matching the firepower of his past, the math was closing in like a vice. The palace had become a ticking time bomb, and soon the bill collector would come knocking. But what truly detonated Hammer's fortune wasn't the marble, the horses, or the gold-plated plumbing, it was the payroll. Loyalty for Hammer came with a time card. He brought 200 people onto the books, childhood friends, cousins, neighbors from East Oakland who never had a job outside of the corner store. Not a charity, it was a full-blown employment program, and he was the government. Monthly burn on that? Between $500K and $1 million, just in wages. I'm watching over this slow-motion implosion. His older brother, zero financial training, zero experience. The guy did not run numbers, except into the ground. Between 91 and 96, Hammer had actually spent $50 million more than he had brought in. And then, of course, adjusted for inflation, that's $73 million, which is still pretty modest. We're looking at probably $77 to $80 million when all's said and done. A figure so catastrophic it became a cautionary tale across the entire entertainment industry. And then, inevitably, came the crash. The kind you cannot dance your way out of. Just as his finances were going up in smoke, the sound of hip-hop changed, and Hammer got left in the ashes. The bubblegum hooks and feel-good anthems that once ruled the charts started to feel like kids' music next to the hard-edged reality of gangster rap. Dre, Snoop, Tupac, this new wave didn't wear shiny pants or dance with backup crews. They bled on the mic. And by comparison, Hammer started to look like a cartoon. In '94, he tried to outrun the fade. The funky headhunter was his Hail Mary. He had totally ditched the smile, cranked the bass, leaned into this gangsta persona, and forced it practically screamed midlife crisis. Gone was the glitter, replaced with the leathers, the scowls, the songs about street cred. But the rebrand, dead on arrival. Critics pounced, fans vanished, nobody bought it, not even the old crowd or the new. It read less as evolution and more like sheer panic. MC Hammer had tried to repackage himself for a world that had already moved on. And in that silence, as the music faded and the bills mounted, the final reckoning began to knock. By April of 1996, the party was officially over and the cleanup was brutal. Hammer and his wife filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, dragging their crumbling empire into court with the hope of salvaging what little was left. And what spilled out in the paperwork was the stuff of financial horror stories. Over 200 creditors lined up, hands out. One of them, Deion Sanders, who'd fronted his friend $500,000 in a personal loan, now gone up in smoke. Total debt? Between 10 and 14 million in those dollars. Total assets? Just 1 million. The math was humiliating. The Fremont estate, once a $42 million monument to Hammer's domination, sold for a pitiful $6.8 million. The buyer flipped it a year later for even less. Custom gold toilet, sold off by the pound. The fleet of cars, gone. The jet, the helicopters, the $1 million horses, all liquidated. The crown, the throne, the kingdom, gone. Just rubble and receipts. What came next, no one saw coming. Hammer lost the mansion, cars, the empire, but he didn't lose the script. In later interviews, he would call the collapse a blessing in disguise. No bitterness or blame, just pure perspective. Remember, at his core, he was a hustler. So he may have lost it all, but he knew how to play the game. And he claimed the fall grounded him, forced him to reevaluate everything, and brought him closer to what mattered, his family, his faith, and a kind of peace that fame never really gave him. But peace didn't mean freedom. The wreckage would keep trailing him. In 2013, the IRS came back swinging, slapping him with a lawsuit for $800,000 in unpaid back taxes from the original implosion years, 96 and 97. Bankruptcy does not erase tax debt. It just delays the pain. Add in unpaid California state and property taxes, and the picture gets uglier. And to this day, every dollar that Hammer earns goes through the IRS first. Paychecks garnished, royalties siphoned. And even the public flare-ups hadn't vanished. In February 2013, he got arrested after an argument over an unregistered car. A routine traffic stop turned confrontation. The charges were dropped, but the moment said a lot. Hammer might have survived the fall, but the system still had its hand in his pocket. Yet through all of it, he was quietly building something unexpected. The man who once lived in the 40,000 square foot monument to ego now settled into a modest ranch-style home in Tracy, California. No gold toilets or helicopters, just a backyard and a second chance. And after the fire, Hammer didn't claw his way back to fame. He let it go. And with him, went Stephanie, his wife since 1985, and their 5 kids, the only entourage that really mattered anymore to him. And that's where the reinvention started. MC Hammer became an ordained minister, started preaching back in Oakland, not as a spectacle, but as somebody who had been there. His sermons? Financial literacy, humility, overspending, less gospel flash and more fiscal rehab. He turned those scars into scripture. The MC on his name tag took on a new meaning, man of Christ. No stage lights, no dancers, just a pulpit, microphone, and the weight of hard-earned wisdom. But he wasn't done evolving. His next act would come from a place nobody expected. The one place where reinvention was the brand, Silicon Valley. So while the pulpit might have given him some peace, it was Silicon Valley that actually gave MC Hammer purpose. His most jaw-dropping pivot didn't happen on stage or behind a mic. He was in boardrooms and co-working spaces surrounded by coders, startup founders, venture capital sharks who barely remembered you can't touch this if they even knew it at all. But Hammer, he had seen this future before. Back in the 90s, while everybody was fighting over CDs and box sets, he was talking about streaming music videos online. People had laughed. The tech was not ready, but Hammer saw it coming. When the 2000s hit, he dove all the way in. 12-hour days, not in studios, but in tech meetings. He invested, consulted, became a fixture in the Valley, not as a novelty act, but as somebody who understood branding, scalability, how to move culture. So out with the chasing of clout and in with the chasing of infrastructure, a new way to own what artists create. And after losing everything once, this time Hammer was building something that could not be repoed. And somehow, through all that wreckage and reinvention, he managed to do what so few could, stay standing. And it wasn't just some kind of vanity side hustle. Hammer's tech resume could embarrass half the VC world. He wasn't just shaking hands at conferences. He was in war rooms, offering marketing strategy to platforms that would reshape the internet. In the early days of Pandora, it was Hammer who gave founder Tim Westergren key support and visibility when nobody else saw the vision. Salesforce, he was there too, lending crucial advice on how to turn a CRM tool into a cultural force. And then there's the flex that most billionaires cannot even claim. Most billionaires. That Hammer actually owned a piece of Twitter. Back before it came X, before the buyouts and the chaos, Hammer was already there stacking equity. He took stakes in Bump Technologies, Square, a host of early movers that would go on to become household names. The guy who once blew millions on marble statues now had skin in the next generation of empire. No flashy comeback tours or desperate albums. Hammer's greatest performance? He pulled off the hardest trick in showbiz. Got smart when nobody was watching. And of course, he never really fully walked away from the world that made him famous. The music's still there, 10 albums deep, and he's still recording. Never stopped creating, he just stopped pretending the charts owed him anything. And when the 90s nostalgia wave hit, Hammer wrote it better than most. In 2019, he launched the Hammer's House Party Tour, a full-blown throwback that packed venues and reminded a whole generation why they wore those pants in the first place. The brands came calling too. Hammer turned that legacy into a business model. Cheetos Super Bowl commercial, Starburst, 3M command strips. If it needed energy, swagger, or a wink at history, Hammer was the man. He'd show up and steal the scenes. He even went reality TV, headlining A&E's Hammer Time, and popped up as a dance competition judge and TV host. The man who once ruled MTV adapted to a world run by memes and streaming. So he once had 70 million. Now he has a couple million. That's the current estimate. A long climb from bankruptcy court, but a far cry from the empire he torched in the 90s. But he doesn't wear it like a scar. He calls it a testimony. He's not chasing comeback headlines or pity documentaries, but he is chasing a Guitar Meets Science documentary, as everybody should be chasing. But when it comes down to it, MC Hammer's buried the ego, rebuilt the soul, and reprogrammed the hustle for a new era. He didn't just survive the fall. Stanley Kirk Burrell outlived it, and somehow, that's the part that people still underestimate. To my subscribers, thank you so much. You freaking rock. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, take that subscribe button, break out your pair of scissors, chop it into a pair of hammer pants, give it off to a pool manufacturer, and have that pool placed into your backyard in that very shape. And what the hell, might as well do it with the like button as well so that you got 2 pools. Join the family, or thank you so much for watching.